Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Pesty Podcast. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Margaret Garcia. She's a visionary leader whose extensive 20-year journey through the pest control industry has uniquely positioned her at the forefront of customer service innovation. As president of Grit PPO, Margaret champions a specialized approach to contact center services, deeply rooted in the nuances of pest control, wildlife management, and lawn care industries. Beyond managing operations, she's a pivotal force in reshaping how companies engage with their customers through meticulously crafted training programs aimed at enhancing client experiences. Today, she joins us to share her invaluable insights on transforming customer service into a cornerstone of business success in pest control. So, Margaret, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I was telling you before the show, I'm super excited to share just all the knowledge that I know that you have. And we got to meet for the first time at the Pest World conference a couple weeks ago in Denver, which is super cool after some email exchanges. So let's jump into it, shall we?
Yeah, absolutely.
I want to start with the kind of your origin story in this domain. So can you describe the moment when you realized the importance of customer service in pest control and decided to focus on it?
Well, I started in this industry about 20 something years ago, and I started out, part-time telemarketing. And I did really well because I talk really fast. I always say this, I could usually get my pitch out before I got hung up on. And so I worked for a very high functioning, fast-paced pest control company. And as I moved into other positions, I started to realize that, that fast talking that helped tremendously as, a telemarketer. As I transitioned into other roles in the organization, like sales and mostly obviously customer service management, that same way of communicating didn't always align with what I was doing. So customer service became very focused also on what I was saying and how I was saying it, because it kind of directly impacted almost every interaction that I had. As a CSR, whether I felt like somebody left a conversation, maybe not understanding what the next steps were, even though we just had a whole conversation about it, or it was, through my years of being a trained CSR where certain things are affected by outside sources, and so how they all kind of connect. So that aspect of, customer service and pest control really became a focus from kind of day one of transitioning out of being a telemarketer, where your goal was just, kind of get somebody on the phone really quick.
Yeah. Well, telemarketing. So I cut my teeth in the pest control industry doing door-to-door sales.
Uh-huh.
So similar kind of background, and you learn a lot. You grow a thick skin when
I was just going to say it's a great place to start because you absolutely grow that thick skin that you really kind of need for the trajectory of the future to come.
Yep, absolutely. All right. What are some common misconceptions in pest control customer service that you work to correct through your training?
One of the common misconceptions I feel like is when it comes to sales and customer service. I think that even as a young customer service rep, it kind of feels like when your organization kind of charges you with the responsibility of maybe presenting service programs, whether I see a customer that has a general pest control program and I should be mentioning an accelerated opportunity to upgrade that includes maybe, termite coverage or something else. I think a lot of the times we feel like it's used car sales. We don't want to do it. You don't want to kind of sell someone something. And for me, again, as a young CSR, and what we try to instill in our training is that it's actually not. It's more presenting need-based solutions. And when you look at it from that aspect, right, that there's a need and you have a solution and all you're doing is kind of making that recommendation the same as you would to any friend that called you for advice, it really helps change the way that you think about it.
That's interesting. A need-based solution. I don't know that I've heard that term before, but it helps you reposition the way you think about yourself as, like you said, rather than a car salesman, almost like an educator, right? Like you're just there to present the options and to make it clear the value of those options. And you don't need to be there you're not pushing something onto someone that they don't want, right? At the end of the day, they can say no, and they can say it's not for me or not right now. So I really like that positioning, and I'll bet that way of thinking about it would help a lot of people who otherwise are really turned off by the idea of having their CSRs be that pushy salesperson type.
Yeah. And even for the CSR, again, presenting it, you always kind of think like you don't want to have to sell someone something. And it's not like that. We love giving advice by nature. If my girlfriend calls me up and says, this is what she has going on, I'm asking all the questions to get all the, information. And then I'm saying at the end of it, well, this is what I would do, and that's kind of what to me pest control, feels like. It's not, kind of again, used car sales. It's somebody calling saying, I have this roach problem, and you're asking questions like how long you've been seeing the activity and where you're seeing the activity. And then, at the end you say, well, this is what I would recommend. Right. And usually programs are, ongoing services because they mean the right service for that type of pest, right? Multiple service visits might be needed to, whatever. Or, there might be one-time services. And that's kind of like how a conversation feels when you're talking to a friend. Like you could do this or you could do that. If I were you, this is what I would do. But, if you don't want to do that, then ultimately it's their decision, right? Financial restraints or, scheduling issues. Like ultimately they don't have to take your advice, but you most likely want to give it in an educated way.
Right. And they're calling you because they're looking for
And they're
advice.
calling you with that, right? They're calling you asking for that advice.
Yeah, you're not the friend who's giving advice when no one asks for it. Cool. So next I want to talk about technology's role. What impact has technology, especially AI, which is of course the hot topic right now, had on the customer service and sales side of pest control?
Yeah. I mean, I think technology for anyone else, especially for us, but for everyone else, right, is just streamlined a lot of the processes. And that's really kind of the biggest impact it's had on our organization is just streamlining processes, whether it be being able to get information to someone faster, or even, the time that I've spent for years on training and having to type things out. I mean, now you can just kind of go in and just, add your thought process and it eloquently puts it together for you. And that saves so much time. So, pieces of AI have dramatically improved our organization.
And are you guys leveraging AI? Because you mentioned training, and I know, so use CallRail, or at least we always prefer our clients use CallRail, which is a call tracking and form tracking software. And they have recently rolled out some AI features that will analyze transcripts across calls or individual calls. They'll do weekly call summaries. And our clients have found that helpful for customer service training, sales training, in particular, if they have a script that they either need to somewhat rigidly or fluidly follow, and also to identify tonality in conversations, right? Like, is the tone neutral or positive, or are there negative experiences that you need to go back and look at? So are you guys using AI in that way yet?
Absolutely. I mean, again, like that aspect of the training, the learning and the development. So you utilize platforms that give you that ability to do call analytics in a very fast and efficient way are like one of the number one, things that we utilize AI for as well. But there's
How do you,
nothing like that good old fashioned making CSRs listen to their own phone calls.
yeah, oh, for
You
sure.
still
Yeah,
have to, there's still some old school aspects of training like that and role playing that just are the center and the core of really kind of, training and learning and developing your team.
totally. Nothing will have the impact of watching game tape.
Yeah, AI just gives you the fast track of which ones to actually watch, right?
Yeah, exactly. And when it comes to training new agents, how do you integrate new customer service agents into your system while ensuring they uphold your high standards?
Everything about our training from day one is focusing on teaching what are the foundational pieces of it, right? These are your core foundational training pieces, and so we call them like one-way protocols. And so, it's kind of like calling it a one-way protocol just implies that, right? There's only one way to do it. And so there's only one way to say it, or there's only one way to do a movement, or there's only one way to write a particular, kind of formatted text. And so we focus a lot on that foundation, the call scenarios, the CRM softwares, the call control technique. And then we gradually kind of add layers in like role playing and like the call audits and the call analytics and real time feedback to kind of maintain the quality. But it's really all based on a very strong foundation.
Interesting. So a strong foundation, and it sounds like you're in the beginning trying to keep it really simple for them, right? Like you're just trying to give them a straightforward way to think about, and maybe even memorize what they need to do so that then as they learn and as that stuff starts to become a little more second nature, they can start to think about some of the advanced types of things to keep in mind. Am I understanding that correctly?
You're right. It's exactly that. You're kind of trying to create these rote behaviors and these rote movements because there's a lot going on phone call. You're having to kind of, pay attention to what the call scenario is. And so you're kind of going through your Rolodex of what we've taught all the call scenarios are going to be to kind of pull out the right response, the right answer. Again, there's core foundational things in the movements that we do in the software so that as you're speaking to somebody, you're able to kind of, think about what your next click is. And you can't do that necessarily, trying to do it all at once. And so there's just parts of interactions that again are just rote behavior. Kind of like when you're driving in a car. I explain it in training. Like it's like when you're driving in a car and you're thinking about your grocery list and you're adding to it, and you're able to still drive the car and not veer off the road when you think about milk, right? Because there's parts of your brain that take over and do that for you while, driving the car while the other parts are kind of making the list. And that's what it is. You want to have that foundation of, I know what to say in this scenario. I know how to respond, or I know where to click and I know what to do. And then there's, the parts of being present in the phone call and having right interactions, but it's kind of bringing it all together. And again, it all starts with some foundational things that are just going to be what you call one-way protocols. There's only one way to do it. The minute you start to sway from that, then every moment of the phone call needs to be live interaction, live engagement, and then you can't multitask, if that makes sense.
Yeah, you have to use your brain essentially, for that part that you really need to be autonomous if possible.
Yep.
I'm curious, with training, is it pretty obvious early on who is going to be highly successful in the role? Or do you ever find that through proper training, you can have people who are not so naturally gifted in the role become very good?
Yeah, I think for this type of training that we do, at least in our organization, it's very much will versus skill. I think parts of my talent and my skill set in the industry of, kind of doing this for so long, but teaching it for so long, I'm pretty confident that I'm able to teach it to just about anybody who wants to learn it. And so when that will versus skill takes over, it's just, if you want it, you just do it. And we've kind of really kind of put together the right processes and the right training that appeals to everybody. Because right in training, there's people that are audio, there's people that are tactile, there's people that are visual. And so our training, at least the way that we do it, it appeals to all of that. It is definitely a show, tell, test method. And so again, we very rarely have people who fail at it, unless again, it just becomes more of something that they're just not well matched for other reasons.
Yeah. So I'll bet in your training, when you're working with a pest control company, 99% of the time you must come in and their training is probably rudimentary at best and probably only one form of training. And if you get to get your, hands in there and really start to engage with the client and their CSRs, I mean, they just must be like, this is like, now I can do my job so much better because this is completely different than what I was ever given in terms of a tool set before.
Yeah, you want to absolutely, present information from day one. I mean, so much of our industry, and again, even my upbringing in the industry was just sit down next to somebody, watch what they do, and then do it. And when you're sitting down and watching, for example, like we do that as well, but there's a preset to sitting down with that person. And there's a preset to things like vocabulary words, so that as you're watching and listening to this person, you're picking up on things and understanding how they all connect. Because when you're sitting down and you have no kind of preset to sitting down, you don't know what you're looking for, right? What am I supposed to be watching? The software movements, what they're saying, what I'm hearing, it's a lot. And sometimes even that is the goal, but you have to compartmentalize it. So maybe one day you're going to focus on this, and then the next day you're going to focus on it.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. That was some gold for some of the PCOs listening, I'm sure. Next, what I want to talk about is managing emotionally labor, which is something you've spoken about in the past. And how do you support your team in managing this aspect of their work?
Yeah, we talk about, I mean, I talk about this a lot. Like I say all the time, like where this is work is having to be in a good mood 100% of the time, right? It's not about learning about the biology of pests or the softwares. It's really just having to be in a good mood 100% of the time. And that's where sometimes this is even not the right position for some people. Some people can't even rebound from one call to the next without you have that, when you're a customer service rep, you have that responsibility to not take the emotions of one call into the other. And that can be very hard for some people. They don't rebound as quickly in between phone calls. And so it's really about giving your team, like anchors, and making sure we have things like we call like attitude anchors, right? There's maintenance and there's repair anchors. And maintenance anchors are the things that you do, like getting enough sleep, bringing in a good lunch, making sure that you're kind of sustaining yourself. And then there's repair music. There's repair anchors, things like music, like, listening to music, like getting up and getting a cup of coffee, talking to a coworker, right? When I hang up with that phone call and I turn to, Andrew, and I go, oh my God, Andrew, Mrs. Garcia, she's really, right? That's actually what you call like a repair anchor, right? It's an attitude anchor. We lean on each other. And so when we say like you have to be in a good mood 100% of the time, it means that if Andrew comes in a bad mood, you ever work in an office and somebody just comes in on Monday and you can tell they didn't have a good weekend, like the energy in the room changes. And so I'm depending on Andrew being in a good mood to help me when I get off that call, right? To talk to me, to leverage that change in my mood from the call that I just got over. But Andrew can't do that if Andrew's in bad mood, right? So we all have to. It's kind of like that Snickers commercial, right? Like you need a Snickers. That's
Yeah.
exactly what this environment is. And so we depend on each other for the good moods that we need to be in to be able to bring those things to the phone. And so when you're also working, say like remotely, it's a lot harder because you don't have the energy of those around you and you're depending very much on yourself. So it's just that as managers and as teams, we have to find ways of giving that and infusing that into everybody's week or day with lighthearted, kind of things with company culture, and stuff like that. Or maybe even with training, but making it fun, and stuff like that.
Yeah. And you almost have to, as a CSR, and maybe even as someone leading a team of CSRs, you kind of have to think of the CSR kind of has to think of himself as an athlete, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like repair and
Yep.
maintenance. I mean, those are, as soon as you said those things, I thought, oh, that's very much like athletics, right? Like you need to take a break in between the different types of exercises that you might be doing, right? Or in between
Mm-hmm.
plays. And certainly things like sleep and proper diet and doing things that keep you mentally in the game are all super important.
Yeah. That's what you're asking of a team when it comes to customer service. You're asking them for emotional labor. And so you have to be able to, like you said, repair and maintain that. And silly little things like, we communicate in our organization with, communication platforms like Slack and Teams, right? And it could be something so little yet uplifting. Like I know in the height of our season, like on a Monday, we'll have like a meme that goes out with like Mel Gibson from Braveheart, ready to go into battle, right? You're bringing everybody, right, that emotional energy they need for that Monday morning rush in like a July, right? And so like those are the things that we talk about. We're talking about the emotional labor.
That makes a lot of sense. Can you explain the importance of call flow and how you optimize this for better customer interactions?
Oh gosh, call flow is having a good call flow is so important. It's basically, how a customer service rep stays just organized and maintains like that calmness and having an efficient conversation when you're talking to somebody. And so most of the time you have a call flow, right? When you're doing this repetitively, you've developed a call flow. It just might not be in the right order to maximize the efficiency of the interaction. So a call flow is just how you politely like move a call to close, and so you have different aspects of it, everything from your introduction. It's kind of like when you were in elementary school and you were being taught how to write an essay and your teacher said that there was an introduction, right? An introduction, a body, a
Mhm.
middle, and an end, an ending paragraph. That's literally what a call flow is. And so you compartmentalize it into different sections. And again, the beauty of this industry and most, customer service roles is that you know what the call scenario is going to be. Therefore, you can build out your call flow accordingly. And then it also helps with things like branded consistency, making sure that all of your team members are answering the call the same way as your introduction, just like they should all be closing the call the same way with your ending. Those are all part of your branding.
Yeah. And speaking of branding and call flow and having a certain order of doing things, that is going to be different from one company to another, right? So how do you maintain consistency in customer service across different clients and regions?
A good question. So, well, it all comes from that training, right? Those one-way protocols and that foundational training. So you have to have, or at least for us being the outsourced kind of call center doing things for 50 different companies, you still have to have majority of it standardized, right, across all clients. As far as things like the software movements, for us, again, it might take you 12 clicks to maybe do a service setup, but if we can get you to 10, and still answer the call and have a meaningful interaction and maybe sell a service, then we consider it success. If for some reason the movement is simplistic enough and we can do it all, that's great. But we do have to kind of standardize our mobility and things like softwares and then allow for certain customizations. And then mostly we have organic conversations and dialogue. So we actually won't, pick up for one company saying it's a sunshiny day and then the next company. A lot of what we're doing is really kind of easy because we create that foundational training and the standardization to it, and then just allow for just great organic, great tone, great inflection, great, interactions.
Yeah, and so this is a good segue into my next question because you're talking about, all these aspects of the job being great. What is a key piece of advice that you give to new customer service representatives in the pest control industry?
I would say give yourself a full season. Don't consider yourself fully trained unless you get through a full season of pest control. By that, it means, right, like January to December, because most of the time we're hiring team members in our off season, right? Because that gives us the time to spend with them. But, if you're training on kind of all things pest control, you're training on them on things that potentially, depending on your geographic location, aren't what they're getting hit with on the phones. So you're trying to tell them all the things that are important about wasps and bees and things like that, right? But you're not getting wasp and bee calls, you're getting maybe rodent calls. And either way, even if you're preparing them for it, you still have to actually experience it and be on the phones for it. And so pest control has that right cycle of different pest issues throughout the season. So I always say to new reps, don't consider yourself fully trained until you get through a full season. Because then after a full season, you kind of know what's coming, right? You know what the spring is going to happen. You know termites are going to swarm. You know what's going to happen in bee season. 1 minute the phone call is going to be it's the size of a golf ball, and then it's the size of a basketball. And then, rodents are coming in to stay warm like everything else. After that, everything beyond that becomes just perfecting your craft. And that's when it becomes fun. Because by then you're kind of your conviction. When I explained levels of training, I always tell all of my new team members, right? There's different levels of it. There's comfort. There's just you getting comfortable. And then there's you getting confident. And then there's you having conviction, right? Comfort is just you coming in. You're like, okay, this is my seat. This is my desk. I get it, right? Confidence is like, oh, I understand. Okay. When the phone rings, I'm supposed to answer. They're going to say this. I'm going to say that. Conviction is when you put it all together. Conviction is when you're picking up and telling someone, the termite baiting system is the only resolution to this termite problem because, termites, come from the ground. Like conviction is you mean what you say, what you're saying is going to solve this problem and you're going to help this customer and you're going to set up this service and you're going to sell this program and you're going to send out this contract. And that's where it comes.
And getting from comfort to conviction, it sounds like one aspect of that is certainly going to be a matter of just time, right? You just need to put in the reps. Is there anything else tactically that, makes the difference of someone getting from comfortable to confident and then ultimately conviction? Are you familiar with Pareto's principle, the 80-20 rule?
Yes.
Yeah. So is there like a 20% of things that someone needs to really get right in order to get to that place of conviction and greatness?
The hardest part about it is consistency, is those one-way protocols. Because so many times you come in really great, you're new, this is the only way that you know how to do it. And so you do it because you're being taught to do it. And then things get busy and you kind of get complacent and you cut a corner and then you stop saying something, you stop doing something. And then all of a sudden your call's taking a little bit longer and you can't really figure out what it was. So the hardest part is just being consistent all the way through so that left brain takes over when the right brain's doing something. So like for me internally with our team, we always say like, if something about your job aspect is feeling frustrating, you have to go back to the process. What changed in the process? Because nothing about this should be frustrating. It should just feel like maybe high call volume, which is great because most of us do really well with high call volume because it makes the day go faster. You are just more confident on your phone calls. You're kind of selling it like take it or leave it. Like, your interactions are kind of, buzzing from that high volume. But if you're feeling frustrated and trying to get it all done, then it's usually always some rhythm. So the key from comfort to conviction is always consistency.
Cool. It's a lot of C's, which is
Yeah,
great. I love alliteration. And how do you measure success in customer service and sales, and what metrics or key performance indicators, KPIs, are most important?
You definitely have to have KPIs in this role. I think that as a customer service rep and having been in this seat for many years of a customer service rep and then also kind of being a manager, you have to have some type of metric that tells me on a consistent basis, where I'm at, how am I doing? Not just your annual kind of one-on-ones, right? Because that takes a long time. And sometimes in one-on-ones, we're talking about things that maybe happened 6 months ago. And as the CSR, I'm like, I'm not even that person anymore. Why am I still talking about it? So the KPIs are super important, the key performance indicators. And we have those expectations set from day one. So like on day one of new hire, training, you're learning that these are all the things we're going to be measuring you on, but don't worry. These are all the ways that we're going to teach you to be successful to actually hit these numbers. You just have to maintain, right? So things like conversion rates, because obviously we do inside sales, call time. We also do data entry. Most people don't know this, but for us, we actually have an internal goal that we have to be at least 90% accurate in our data entry for every company that we start taking calls for. Which to me, I also go back and go is insane because I've been a CSR and most of the time you're not 90% accurate in what you're doing, but it's kind of those metrics that help the want to kind of maintain, right? Or the need to stay consistent and the need to kind of follow those foundational trainings because you have those numbers that have to be hit.
So, okay, cool. So I want to double click on the KPIs a little bit. So close rate, obviously that's a big one, right? Especially
Yep.
in sales. And I would imagine that's something that you're being measured against, especially if
Sure.
a company internally has a team and maybe you're taking overflow work, right? So they're
Mm-hmm.
saying, well, this is what we think our internal close rate is. This is what your close rate is. And then the accuracy of data entry
Mm-hmm.
being an interesting one that I hadn't crossed my mind. What was the second one that you mentioned?
Your call time, right? Your
Call
handle
time.
time on a phone call.
Are there any other KPIs that are super important, or are those kind of big three that you use as your
Those are
North
the big
Stars?
three. We add in also what's called ACW time, like after call work time. It's kind of, call time is when you're talk time is what some, platforms call it. It's when you're engaging with a customer. And then your ACW, your after call work time is when you end the call. And that's you're crossing your I's, dotting your T's. And that's an important metric for us because it also, as a manager, it might tell me if somebody's struggling, in a software with a movement or a process and, in a CRM. Because if the majority of your data entry is happening, obviously, while you're talking to the customer on the phone, which it should be, and then you've disconnected the call, but then there's this lingering amount of time that's going beyond our standard for after call work time, it usually is an indication that somebody's struggling with a software. Maybe they're not speaking up or saying something. So having that metric allows for us to have those open conversations.
Cool. And can you give me benchmarks for what you would expect, or what might be like a range of maybe this isn't great and this is amazing?
For us, I can tell you like our average call time with a current customer is under 3 minutes, from start to finish, meaning that includes after call work time. New business, it might be between 7 and 12, depending on what type of pest it is, if I'm giving preparatory information or sending out an agreement. Our ACW, that after call work time, is under 30 seconds. And that's just my upbringing in the industry. I worked in an industry where my platform, would kind of turn red. It gave you a 25-second countdown. So you knew that you needed to hurry up and
That's
finish up.
so
If you
nerve
went beyond
wracking.
it, it turned red, right? And then, and again, I'm old school. So if it turned red, my manager was like at my desk, like, what's going on? Like, I don't know how she always knew, but she'd be watching it on her supervisor. And so those I think were the good ones, that anything above 30 seconds, if you think about it, most people go, oh my gosh, 30 seconds, but actually sit with a timer. 30 seconds is a long time. It's like telling somebody, hold on a second, and then you really make somebody feel what 30 seconds feels like in silence.
Yeah.
It actually is enough time to kind of copy and paste notes, send out an email. There's lots of things that you can do in that to have your ACW time be 30 seconds and expect it.
Yeah. And what about close rate? Is there like a low and high or a standard that you guys have?
No, for us, it really is a different across multiple companies. There's so many variables that go into it. It could be geographic location, the saturation of your competition. It could be how aggressive you are with scheduling and sales. Or are you just kind of pumping things out and we're at a higher conversion? It could be what your service price is at. What are your offerings? If you're high priced, you're going to get a lower conversion and be happy with it. So there's so many different variables to it. We try
Yeah.
to establish those things when we start with a company so that we know what our benchmarks are.
That makes a lot of sense. And of course, in marketing, we say the same thing, which is, it depends.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Cool. So the last question I have to wrap this up is, what's the next big goal for Grit? And more specifically, how do you plan to achieve it?
Well, gosh, coming out from Pest World, I don't think we've established the next big goal yet. There was so much great energy and great ideas coming off of, Colorado. But I know for us, obviously the continued goal of expanding, our service offerings, which now include what we talked about at Pest World, which is the customer service training. We call it the Grit CX experience. And we're now kind of taking our internal training with our team and, presenting it to other companies. I've been doing that for quite some time, but not so kind of forward to the public. We are continuing to control our growth with new companies that come on with us in a way that doesn't kind of compromise the quality of our calls. But we're also now leveraging things like technology, like we released the partner portal, which is our way of giving more transparency to our clients on the campaigns and the details, and to provide data in a way that there's opportunities to collaborate with us on the data, on what we see kind of going on. Because for us, it's all about focusing on ways to engage, because for us, it's a partnership, right? We call all of our clients a partner, and we believe that wholeheartedly because of our working relationship that we have with our clients, and the belief that when you work together you can build anything, and you can also fix it, right? If something's wrong with it. And so that's the idea of leveraging things like the partner.
Cool. Well, I really appreciate your time. Again, this was super insightful. I learned a lot, and I'm sure anyone who listened is going to walk away with a couple of gold nuggets. So thank you, Margaret.
Thank you.